Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad, amma ba'd. So we've explained two angles to the proof of the existence of the Creator, this temporal causation, this chain of events, and also we talked about what is the explanation as to why limited contingent things have the attributes that they have. And we just looked at one thing, and the only explanation, the foundational explanation for all things, is the fact that there is a necessary being, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who exists. In this one, I want to give you a slightly different angle to the proof of the existence of the Creator. And we've actually touched upon this point already anyway. And it's called Munchausen's trilemma. Why is it called Munchausen's trilemma? Because there's a picture of a man on a horse who's stuck in quicksand and he's slowly sinking in the quicksand, and he decides and he thinks to himself, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to grab my hair and pull myself up. Yeah. So it's called Munchausen's trilemma, and it's also known as Agrippa trilemma as well. And the reason why it's called a trilemma is because there's a dilemma is like two problems, but it's a trilemma, it's a three problem thing. It talks about how do we define language and define words. For example, if I was to define the word boat or ship, yeah, or if I defined any other word, yeah, what do I do? How do I define it? I define it by other words, don't I? Yeah, so I would say, okay, ship is something that floats on water. Okay, what's floating on water mean? Oh, that means X, Y, Z. What does that mean? Well, that means something else. What does that mean? That means something else. So whenever we define words, we define it by other words, and those words also have to have definitions with other words. Yeah, and you can sort of see where the problem exists. And so some people have said there's three potential possibilities as to how we have a foundational definition of words. And really, words, by the way, are correlated to meaning. So if we're looking at how do we find the foundational definitions of words, we're talking about also the foundational definitions of meaning as well. How do we know the meanings that we hold? Yeah. Where does it come from? So one possibility that people said was this infinite regression of words and meanings. So we define one word by another word, that word by another word, that word by another word, ad infinitum. Like the dominoes example. The second example, or second possibility, was circular reason. So you define this word by this word, that word by that word, and that word by the original word again. This is circular reasoning. And the third one was axiomatic arguments. To say that, well, we just have brute facts. Yeah, we have just words that just are that meaning. There's no way we can make it more simpler, and we just take it as a given. It's axiomatic in regards to that. Now, in the previous videos, we talked about the impossibility of an infinite regression. We said that, domino example, that for the last domino to fall over, it has to be hit by the domino before it. And that one has to be hit by the domino before that, and so on and so forth. And if you have an infinite number of dominoes, none of them are going to fall over. You need to have a beginning sequence. So if you have an infinite regression of words and meanings, then you don't have no foundation to anchor the meaning in the first place. You just don't know what that meaning is. And in fact, we don't have an infinite number of words anyway in the language. So we know this idea that you can have an infinite number or an infinite regression is impossible. So we can't use that as an explanation. Similarly, we talked about circular reasoning in the previous video as well, where we said that, could one thing depend upon another thing, depend upon another thing, depend back upon itself? And we said that's impossible. We gave the example of the chicken and the egg argument. The chicken causes the egg. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? Well, chicken causes the egg, and the egg then hatches to become a chicken, which then causes an egg, and so on. And there's a cycle. But if you go back and say what came first, then you have a problem. You have no ability to determine what comes first. So when you talk about circular reasoning in the meanings of words, how we define a word and we go back to its original meaning, then nothing would have actually any meaning. So this leaves us with axiomatic arguments. And when we say axiomatic arguments, they're just saying brute facts. But we need to understand it in a slightly different way. Axiomatic arguments, like when we talked about rational thinking, that rational thinking requires previous information. These are the axioms, and that previous information is something that's either we're created with or we are, and also I should say, given to us by the society at large. So we know language comes not from our own innate creation, but rather it is innate creation plus what we are taught, yeah, regards to that, those words and language. So, so the original way to think, the original comprehension, the ability to comprehend, requires something to be an axiom. The question becomes, where does the axiom come from? Yeah, how do you get that original thought? Language is very key here, because language is not learnt, so it's not innate. It has to be learnt. And if you don't learn language by the age of 7, you don't have the ability to make grammatically constructed sentences. So the only way to explain the meaning of words is by what? Is by reference to the Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 31, it mentions about Adam alayhi salam. It says, and he taught Adam alayhi salam all the names of everything. So this indicates to us that language is a proof. The fact that we have language is a sign to the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thank you very much.